We take it for granted. You walk into a grocery store, toss a loaf of sliced white or a rustic baguette into your cart, and tap your card for maybe $3 or $4. It represents about 10 minutes of work for the average person today. But if you were standing in the heart of Rome in the year 79 AD, that simple transaction wasn't just a trip to the store, it was the central axis of the entire empire. I've spent the last month obsessed with a single question. How much did a loaf of bread actually cost 2,000 years ago? Not just the price in ancient coins, but the cost in human sweat, hours of labor, and political stability. What I found shifted my entire perspective on how we value our lives today. The results didn't just surprise me, they painted a picture of a world that was simultaneously more advanced and more brutal than I ever imagined. To understand the price of bread, we first have to understand the money. We can't just use a currency converter. If I tell you a loaf of bread costs 2 asses, that sounds like a joke. If I say it cost half a sestercius, it means nothing to a modern ear. The Roman economy was built on a tiered system of metals. At the top, the gold aureus, the billionaire's coin. Then the silver denarius, the backbone of the military and trade. Below that, the brass sestertius, and finally, the copper ass. For the average Roman, the plebeian, life happened in asses and sestertii. But here's where it gets tricky. Economists often try to link the denarius to the price of gold or silver today, but that's a trap. A silver coin back then had much higher purchasing power because silver was rarer and the manual labor to mine it was immense. To find the real price, we have to look at labor hours. How long did a Roman have to work to afford a single loaf? Let's set our baseline. In the mid-first century, a common unskilled day laborer, the guy hauling stones for the Colosseum or working the docks at Ostia, earned roughly 3 to 4 sestertii a day. That's about 12 to 16 asses. A Roman legionary, a professional soldier, earned about 225 denarii per year. When you break that down, it's less than a denarius a day, but they also had deductions for food and equipment. So let's stick with our day laborer earning 4 sestertii. Now, let's look at the bread. In the ruins of Pompeii, archaeologists found several loaves of panis quadratus, the iconic circular loaf divided into 8 segments. These loaves were standardized. They weighed about 800 grams, or roughly 1.7 pounds. Based on graffiti found on the walls of Pompeii and legal records from the era, the price of this standard loaf was typically 2 asses. Wait, let's do the math. If you earn 16 asses a day and a loaf of bread costs 2 asses, that means one loaf costs 1/8 of your daily income. If you work an 8-hour day, you spent exactly 1 hour of hard manual labor to buy a single loaf of bread. But not all bread was created equal. In the 21st century, whole grain or artisan bread is often more expensive. In Rome, it was the opposite. If you were wealthy, you ate panis candidus, white bread made from finely sifted flour. This was expensive because sifting was done by hand and wasted a lot of the grain. If you were poor, you ate panis altopyrus, a dark, heavy bread containing the bran. And here's the surprise part. The quality of Roman bread was often dangerous. To keep prices low and profits high, bakers often padded the flour. We have records of bread containing chalk, bone meal, and even fine white sand to add weight. Because the grain was ground using volcanic stone mills, the bread was naturally filled with grit. Archaeologists studying Roman skeletons have found that their teeth were often ground down to the stumps by the time they were 30, simply from friction. So, for your 1 hour of labor, you weren't getting a soft, vitamin-enriched slice of Wonder Bread. You were getting a rock-hard, tooth-shattering disc of calories that might contain actual dirt. However, there's a massive twist in the story of Roman bread prices. If you lived in the city of Rome itself, you might not pay for bread at all. The Roman government realized early on that a hungry population was a rebellious one. This led to the cura annone, the grain dole. By the time of Augustus, upwards of 200,000 male citizens were eligible to receive about 33 kilograms of grain per month for free. This changes the how expensive was it question entirely. For a significant portion of the urban population, the cost of bread wasn't money, it was political submission. You didn't work for the bread, You were given the bread so you wouldn't overthrow the emperor. But there's a catch. The government gave you the grain, not the loaf. You still had to take that grain to a miller and a baker. You had to pay for the grinding and the wood for the oven. Even free bread had a hidden cost that could eat up 10% of a laborer's weekly wage. And if you lived outside of Rome, in the provinces of Gaul or Britain, there was no dole. You were at the mercy of the harvest. In a bad year, the price of that 2 A's loaf could skyrocket to 10 or 20 asses. During famines, a single loaf could cost a week's wages. Imagine paying $600 for a single loaf of bread today. That was the volatility of the ancient world. When I started this, I thought Roman bread would be incredibly cheap because they didn't have the corporate greed of today. I was wrong. When you look at the labor hour metric, bread was roughly 6 to 10 times more expensive for a Roman than it is for us. But the real surprise isn't the price, it's the fragility. Today, we spend about 6 to 10% of our total income on food. A Roman laborer spent nearly 50% to 70% of their daily earnings just to put enough calories on the table to survive until tomorrow. Bread wasn't a side dish, it was the entire budget. When we look at those 2,000-year-old loaves found in the ashes of Pompeii, we aren't just looking at food, we're looking at the most expensive thing those people owned. Each of those 8 segments represented about 7 minutes of sweat and toil in the Mediterranean sun. The next time you're at the store and you see a loaf of bread for $3, realize that in the eyes of a Roman citizen, you are living in a world of impossible abundance. You are essentially eating the food of the gods for the price of a few minutes of your time. So, how expensive was bread 2,000 years ago? It cost an hour of your life if times were good, your teeth if you weren't careful, and your political freedom.